Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Middle East Forum's weekly podcast series, Israel Insider. My name is Ahnaf Kalam, and I will be moderating today's discussion. We're pleased to be joined today by Alex Selsky, who is the advisor to the Middle East Forum's Israel Victory Project, joining us to give us a brief overview of the top events currently going on in Israel. Mr. Selsky will speak for 15 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A session from the audience. And if you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen to type your question. And with that, I will turn the discussion over to Mr. Alex Selsky.
Thank you, Ahnaf. Thank you for all our guests. So this week we wanted to speak about the opening of the summer session of the Knesset of Israeli Parliament. What are the challenges of the Prime Minister heading this session, because the political tensions are back, and what does it mean? Can he continue to lead a stable government, or is it a danger of elections? So let's, I prepared actually the major challenges and major points of, that challenge the Knesset, challenge the politics and Netanyahu himself during the next session. And all these things we already can see at the beginning of the session explode in a way, and I would like to go through and to see, what are the challenges. So the first one, it definitely is the expansion of the operation in Gaza. The Security Cabinet decided a few days ago to approve the expansion of the Operation Gaza with the goal of, winning Hamas and preventing Hamas from ruling in Gaza. It means that another draft of Israeli reserve soldiers and officers, including me, will take place, and it's a major event, not only in the security arena, but also politically, because exactly at the same time, a major other political challenge is what we call the draft bill, the law that the ultra-Orthodox parties demand to pass in order to provide an exempt to ultra-Orthodox men not to serve in the army. Now, they push Netanyahu to pass this bill for a long time already, and they condition the stability of the government and their voting with the coalition by this law. Now, there is an argument about how serious are the ultra-Orthodox in this pressure and in this ultimatum, if they really mean it. Because everybody understands that Netanyahu doesn't have better partners than ultra-Orthodox, and the ultra-Orthodox don't have a better option than the right-wing Netanyahu government, because they will not get the same things they get from Netanyahu with the opposition. On the other hand, we see that, after all, the ultra-Orthodox parties see that Netanyahu doesn't give them what they want. And now we also see that there are talks about possible cuts in the budgets of ultra-Orthodox yeshivas, ultra-Orthodox schools, which is required by the overall cut, a very severe cut that there is in the budget to finance the war in Gaza and in the north and all the security situation, and and strengthening the army and the security system of Israel during the next years. So we see that this situation every day and every hour gets more and more tense and more unexpected, because already these days we saw that the ultra-Orthodox parties didn't vote with the coalition. And they say that we will not vote with the coalition until we see progress with this law. During just the last couple of hours, Netanyahu had a meeting with them and Yuli Edelstein, who is the head of the Security Committee of the Knesset, which works on promotion of this bill. And they try to find a compromise. But also Netanyahu understands that he cannot really pass this bill now during this war when we see still, and we will see it in the future, young men, not ultra-Orthodox, if secular or religious, Zionist religious, fall in this war. And exactly when these young men and not young men, reserve soldiers, fall in the battle in this war that everybody understands that is so just, and that army needs more and more soldiers. Exactly now to pass this bill, Netanyahu understands that it will definitely be a big challenge, and it can be a big threat on him, on Likud. Another thing that is, more and more tense is the cost of living in Israel. We see in every field, we see the prices skyrocketing. Prices of food have raised in, some things, 10%, 15%, 8%, 20%. So people just keep the head and just cannot follow the prices. The cost of living is extremely rising, and this is something also that will strengthen the pressure on the government exactly when the war demands more finance and more cuts. So we see that all the public workers from this month, from April, meaning in the first time in the wage that is received in May, these days is cut with 3 and something percent, which is not so low. Hostages. We have still, there's an argument how many of them are alive, but 59 overall hostages and 21 or 24 hostages alive. There is an argument in Israel how many of them are alive. Government said just a few hours ago that we know that 21 are alive, and another 3 we don't have definite information about. We saw how Prime Minister's wife sitting next to him, when he said 24, she said less, and it made huge noise in Israeli public. We heard President Trump says 21, so there is still a big pressure to complete the hostage deal. And here we must say also that the whole, situation with the relationship with Trump gets more and more complex, because yesterday we heard President Trump declares that there is a ceasefire between the United States and the Houthis exactly after the Houthi missile hits area next to, within the area of the Israeli airport, international airport, and we see international air companies that cancel flights. And after that, Israel made a huge strike on Houthi airport, international airport. And exactly after that, when Israel seems to be in the peak of this battle with the Houthis, we hear American president says, well, we have a ceasefire. Many in Israel heard it and saw it as abandoning Israel, as kind of saying of Trump that it's not our war. If Israelis want, we get what we want. Houthis will not attack American ships. So if Israel wants still to have this war, they can continue, but Israel is still attacked. So it looks for many Israelis as saying, if Houthis attack Israel, it's not our problem. And yesterday's declaration of Trump on this issue, it was a briefing we heard in the news of senior Israeli politician, which apparently is Prime Minister, or this declaration was approved by the Prime Minister, when we hear a briefing that says that Israeli government was surprised by this declaration of President Trump. And now we can see in the news that Trump says that, okay, if Israelis don't wake up on the negotiations with the Saudis, we will get our own negotiation and our own deal with the Saudis without the Israelis. So we see more and more tension and surprises between Netanyahu and Trump. And Trump comes to Israel next week, should come to Israel next week, and all these issues of Houthis and Saudis and Gaza war, and initiatives of Americans to have ceasefire in Gaza. Many ask, okay, is it some complex, game where Trump does everything to help us? And definitely, Iran, and we see negotiations between Iran, and we just heard today how Iranian leadership said, okay, let's talk directly with the United States. So we see that the negotiations continue, and we know that Israelis don't like this position. And we saw the tension between Netanyahu and Trump on the position over the negotiations with Iran. And you all remember that Netanyahu said that Trump actually stopped Israeli strike on Iran, and Trump said, no, we didn't, but we just want to give a chance to the negotiations, not to hurry up to the strike. So we see tension between Netanyahu and Trump, and I think that this adds tension and instability to the government and to Netanyahu's control over the coalition, because if Netanyahu is not able to take advantage of Trump administration and to have successful relationships, it definitely will add pressure. We see terror. We see terror comes from Judea and Samaria. We just today had a firing in the northern Samaria, terrorists that come from, again, Jenin. Even though the IDF had very successful anti-terrorist operation in Judea and Samaria, we still see that the terror succeeds to rise its head in Judea and Samaria. And this is also a big challenge for the government. And summarizing it all, we saw today polls on biggest Israeli TV channel, Channel 12, that shows it might be the same tendencies that we saw during the last months, but it's interesting that, again, if Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister, runs, he gets 23, mandates, which is more than anyone else, because Likud gets only 21. And then it's very interesting. We see that the Democrats, led by former deputy of the chief of staff Yair Golan, they get 14 mandates. This is their highest. And now these are the mandates that come from the left, from Avoda, from Gantz and Lapid, but they position themselves in a way of, left, but with hard security stance, and Yair Golan is positioned as, war hero. And then Lieberman, who is next with 10 mandates, which is lower than in polls that he gets if Bennett doesn't run. If Bennett doesn't run, Lieberman becomes in some polls even second or third party in the next Knesset. And then Shas gets 10, and Lapid and Gantz fall dramatically under the 10. Gantz to 7 and Lapid to 9. So we see kind of a shift in the leadership in the opposition. and we see that Likud doesn't succeed to challenge Bennett if he runs. So we see that if Bennett runs, the opposition of today gets a government, gets a coalition without the Arab parties. They can get 63 seats. So going back, when Netanyahu sees that, he understands that he has to have a compromise with the ultra-Orthodox. And the ultra-Orthodox understand that they cannot have better option than this government, because Lapid and Gantz and Liberman will not, and Bennett will not give them what they want or half of what they want, and they even will not need them. So I bet that this government, with all these tensions over the draft bill, over Gaza, over everything, all the partners will understand that this option is better than other, and I see the continuation of stability, and each side, will continue to press, but I don't see that anyone during at least this summer session will really leave the government and destabilize this government and lead to elections. That's my 15, 16 even minutes. So please, your questions, please.
All right, many thanks, Alex. I will begin with a question from Carrie Hillebrand. Now, how does Israel view the Trump deal with the Houthis that basically assures that American vessels will no longer be targeted, but leaves Houthis free to continue to launch missiles at Israel? Is this a marked shift of U.S. policy, and is Trump losing patience with Netanyahu?
Well, I touched that just a few minutes ago, that there is a tension between Netanyahu and Trump, not only over Houthis, over also the Saudi deal and the negotiations with Iran. Yes, definitely. As I said, many in Israel heard this statement of Trump yesterday, and we saw a briefing of senior Israeli official, which definitely comes from Prime Minister or someone approved by the Prime Minister, who said, we were surprised by the statement. And many immediately said that what does it mean? It means like America leaves us alone in this fight, because if the ceasefire is only because they will not strike our ships, meaning Americans, so is it okay to strike Israel few days after the missile hits Ben Gurion airport, and just one day after the Israeli Air Force strikes Houthis? So yes, many see that as kind of surprise. What does it mean? Again, some say, there is some game. Yeah, Netanyahu and Trump, they play some game of good cop and bad cop against Iran and against Turkey and against Houthis, but they are very, very coordinated, but we don't see that. We see that there is tension, there are disagreements, and we all hope that, that they will be resolved.
Thank you. Now, with the United States and Iran actually coming to the table to negotiate, is there any window of opportunity left at all for any strikes, whether American or Israeli, on Iranian nuclear reactors and facilities?
Again, as we hear Netanyahu and Israeli government that says, all the options are on the table, and we can, if we see that there is no progress, if we don't see that, during the negotiations, Iran really gives up its nuclear military program, we will strike. And we also heard President Trump saying, listen, it's not that I stopped Israel from striking, I just want to give chance to negotiations. But again, for us too, all the options are on the table. And by the way, Trump said, some heard it, that he said, he said, we will not be led into the strike on Iran. So some people heard and said, well, that it means that Trump doesn't want to support the strike. But some said, no, no, no. What he meant is that if there will be a strike, we will lead. We will not be led, we will lead the strike. So again, this is, some comment. The first commentary is more pessimist, and the second commentary is more optimist. We hear many words. What will be? We have to wait and see.
Right, thank you. Now, Eric Selkov asks, the Netherlands say they want the EU to change the trade agreement with Israel in order to punish Israel. Do you think that the EU will end up changing the trade agreement, and is Israel worried about this?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that Israeli biggest trade partner is European Union. 60% of Israeli export goes to Europe, not to the States, not to any other country. So yes, definitely for Israel, European Union is a very important partner, and Netherlands are very important player within the European Union. I don't know what to tell you because I always hope that European leaders understand the situation, they understand the threats. They only play politics for their audience, but sometimes I'm disappointed and I see that this is not the case. And sometimes we see that European Union does things that destabilize and hurt Israel really, like for many years financing Israeli NGOs that hurt Israel from within and go to Israeli courts against Israeli policies, security policies. And we do see a shift now. We all were expecting shift to the right in many countries in Europe and in Canada and in Australia. And now we see, as a result of Trump tariff policy, we see a very, very fast shift to the left in Canada, in Australia, and maybe in other countries in Europe. So I think the situation is very unstable. And again, I really hope to think that European leadership really understands the threat and who are the bad players and who are the good players. But these are politics and these are democracies, and they do what their voters want. And this is Europe with all the historic anti Semitism, with all the historic anti Israeli policies. So I cannot tell you that I'm very optimistic, unfortunately. I hope that, Europe will wake up, because if Europe will not wake up, in few decades we will not see Europe as we knew it for a couple of thousand of years.
All right, thank you. Barak Korkmaz asks, what is your opinion on Turkish-Israeli relations regarding Syria?
Well, I think that Israelis today understand more and more that Turkey is the next big threat to Israeli security because of Syria. Today, it was published that Israel and Syria do negotiate secretly through Oman indirectly, which is good news. Good news. But we see that Turkey, becomes more and more active and more aggressive, and not only because of Syria, but also because of economic opportunities that Turkey sees now after it controls Syria against Israel, because there is very significant competition in connecting the Asian markets or Arabic markets to Europe between Turkey and Israel, because there are routes to ship and lead gas and other goods either through Israel or through Europe. And I think that Turkey does everything possible to prevent Israeli export of gas to Europe bypassing Turkey. Uh, The substitute is definitely Qatari gas that can go through Syria and Turkey. So it's very big economic competition, very big economic play, and Turkey is more and more aggressive. So yes, I think that Turkey is the next big or biggest challenge for Israel.
Now, there's also a conflict that has been breaking out between India and Pakistan, and it seems like several Muslim countries, including Turkey, have offered their material support to Pakistan. Israel, of course, is an ally of India. Do you foresee any support or involvement from Israel in that conflict?
Well, there is a support. Israel does provide a big, um, I would say, assistance because it's all trade, but Israel sells weapons to India, and there are very, very good developing more and more relationships with India. And I think that everybody understands that, everything is connected, that if we see Pakistan a threat with the nuclear weapon and God forbid uses a nuclear weapon, it will lead to more and more nuclearization of more areas, and India will want and demand, and more Arabs want and demand, and we see now that more and more countries and Saudis, first of all, say, if Iran will have nuclear weapon, we will definitely need to have nuclear weapon. And if Saudis will have nuclear weapon, Egyptians will demand, and Emirates will demand, and all the rest. So it's all connected. So we must stop these threats of Pakistan. And also India is a very, very important partner of the West. And overall, I think that, much of this war that the Middle East is involved in Israel is a front in is the war over India, to replace it to be the producer and provider of goods to the West instead of China, for many good reasons, because India is democracy, easier to negotiate with, they speak English, they have very good working standards, uh, more morals, more human rights, so and closer. So I think that there is a big war over India, and I think that the whole West will do everything to prevent Pakistan from threatening and using nuclear weapons, and to make everything to secure India for all the reasons that I said.
All right, thank you very much. Now, we are unfortunately out of time for today's podcast. I want to thank you again for taking the time to give us an update this week.
Thank you.
Of course, now for our viewers and listeners, please join us tomorrow on Thursday for a podcast with Joel Burney on the implications of the recent Australian elections. As always, we thank you all again for your viewership and your participation, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks.